Welcome to 5 Good Minutes.
You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Daniel with Dan Irvin.
Well, welcome this week as we are wrapping up our journey through the book of Daniel. If you've been following along so far, this week we're going to take a look at the last three chapters 10, 11, and 12 that walk us through Daniel's third and final vision that he receives. You know, the curtain of history is being pulled back right in front of Daniel's eyes. And, you know, Daniel has been faithful up until this point. He's older now, and he's seen things. He's trying to understand things and make sense of what is going on in the heavenly realms with these visions and how it relates to where he is in his life and on earth. You know, it says in these early parts of chapter 10 that this vision that Daniel received, it was overwhelming and left him trembling, falling to the ground. It says Daniel was unable to stand, and this divine messenger appears to Daniel, this radiant, glorious messenger as described, and his presence is again so powerful that Daniel falls to the ground. You know, Daniel has been invited into seeing something. The events of the world that are happening here, that it's bigger than maybe what others see. I think Daniel's realizing that there is a spiritual battle taking place between good and evil that is unfolding before his eyes. And I don't know, if I was Daniel in this situation, I would probably feel a little like, who am I? You know, maybe a little hopeless, maybe a little how can we stand up against some of the evil in this world? I don't know if you ever have that sense in your day-to-day life and what's happening, that you see things around you and you think, well, how could I even begin to stop evil? How could I even begin to stand up against some of the injustice that I see? You know, it could be micro, it could be macro, it could be, you know, whatever you can imagine. But check out what happens as the story unfolds in chapter 10. This divine figure, and we're unclear about who this divine figure is, reaches out and it touches Daniel 3 times, lifting Daniel's spirit, strengthening him, encouraging him, speaking directly in a tender way to him almost. It says, you know, do not be afraid. You who are highly esteemed. Be strong, over and over again, is the message Daniel receives. So in the middle of this terrifying moment, Daniel's not left alone. He is loved. He is upheld. He is carried. And you know, centuries later, after the book of Daniel, another man would come, Jesus. And Jesus would come in all of his radiance and all of his power, but with humility. Jesus would also touch and walk into the lives of people when they were at their lowest moments, when they were weak. And he was able to speak life into those who were scared or hopeless. But unlike the messenger that we read about here in Daniel chapter 10, Jesus would not be slowed down. He would not be delayed by any forces of evil, but he would confront the power of darkness head on, and not in an overpowering way that many thought the Messiah would come by, but Jesus would surrender. He would lay down his life on earth. He would ultimately win the battle by losing his life, by laying down his life. And I love the connections with the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation. You know, the Revelation in many ways is so connected to the book of Daniel. It's almost like the New Testament's version of Daniel. And it pulls back the curtain and shows us a little bit more into what's going on here. You know, I love Revelation chapter 1, how it describes Jesus with blazing eyes and a voice like rushing waters, kind of similar to Daniel 10. But in Revelation, there's no longer this sense. Jesus is no longer veiled in mystery, you know, what's going on. Revelation 1:17-18 says this: be encouraged by this today. Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the living one. I was dead, and now look, I'm alive forever and ever. And I hold the keys of death and Hades. Jesus came to earth, laid down his life, conquered death, and now lives victoriously, reigning supreme. And we now have the ability to live into that same victory, to understand that we're not alone on earth, that there's a greater battle going on. And we can have confidence today in whatever is happening around us in our lives, because we know that if we have our faith, have our trust in Jesus, he has already won. He has already won. He sees, he knows, and he moves in with us.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.